First up, we have ChatGPT Code Interpreter is now available, excuse me, for everyone. So OpenAI announced on July 6th that over the next week following that date, ChatGPT's Code Interpreter feature is going to be made available to all ChatGPT Plus users. I actually just got access this morning. So if you are a Plus user, you're probably going to see it rolling out very, very soon by the time you're listening to this. So previously, only select users had received access after signing up for a waitlist. So now everybody who pays $20 a month for ChatGPT Plus has Code Interpreter. And what this does is it gives you the ability to do a lot of interesting things using code and data. So it gives you the ability to run code, to use files that you upload to actually produce output. So you can ask questions of or create visualizations from data in certain files you upload. You can analyze data, you can create charts, and you can perform sophisticated math. So you're essentially using an add-on feature within ChatGPT to do these types of data analysis and code-dependent tasks. Now, here's a few examples of ways we've seen people already using Code Interpreter. So first, you could have ChatGPT segment your customer list. If you upload a spreadsheet with customer information, you can instruct ChatGPT to segment it effectively. I saw several examples of this online. You can have it gather and visualize data. One user I saw used ChatGPT with Code Interpreter to actually pull public data from the International Monetary Fund and automatically turn that into a visualized chart. You can also analyze data really effectively. So Wharton professor Ethan Mollick, who we follow very closely, has actually done things like upload an unformatted data from a PDF into Code Interpreter and ask it to perform full data analysis. And Code Interpreter was actually able to figure out the table layout, restructure the data and the formatting. It could run models and then reason about the results from seemingly pretty simple prompts. So this is a really powerful add-on. And Malik, I think, thinks it's one of the more powerful AI tools that we're seeing out there in the market today. So Paul, first off, I think you've read about it, played around with the tool a bit. What kind of use cases do you see for something like this for marketers or business leaders?
Yeah, I actually I've had access to it for like 4 weeks, and I haven't tested it until recently. I finally found time to get in there and play around with it. I think Ethan Mollick's takes are probably the best I have seen on this tool because he's been sharing his experimentation with it for a while. And just a quick plug, Ethan Mollick is actually one of the keynotes at MACON this year, so July 26th to 28th. He will be our day one closing keynote. I think it's the July 27th keynote. So I'm really looking forward to interviewing him because it's just gonna be fireside chat style. But there's so many amazing things he's written, many related to Code Interpreter recently. But he posted just on July 9th on Twitter, and he's just eMollick, Mollick, at eMollick. So he said, Code Interpreter for analysis FAQ. Yes, it is useful and powerful tool for real work. No, it is not appropriate for all types of tasks today. Yes, it will get more capable. No, it doesn't replace data analysts. It's a complement. Yes, you'll need to know some statistics and check the AI. So he then went on to say it operates at the level of a pretty good grad student on most data analysis tasks. It's surprisingly adept, but still makes occasional mistakes and bad choices that a more experienced human would not. However, you can quickly check the analysis. So I think for me, my experience, my understanding of the technology, what I've read about it, and then now what I've experimented with myself, it it does give data analysis capabilities where you previously probably didn't have them. Like if you don't have data analysts on staff, you now can have a grad or post grad level data analyst to do a lot of this work. So anywhere where you need to analyze data from, take your email campaigns and drop it in and say, well, what's interesting about this data? Where's it performing well? What are the anomalies in the data sets? Run graphs, run charts. The thing I found, the experiment I ran was last year I created this AI talent index. So you're familiar with this, Mike. Basically what I was doing was I took sales navigator data, LinkedIn sales navigator data, and I built a workbook where I was trying to find the most likely job titles and industries where AI adoption would be sooner than others. And because, pre-ChatGPT, it was kind of hard to find people who were adopting AI, who were piloting and scaling into organizations. So I had this theory of, if you looked at different job titles and you looked at different verticals and then seniority levels, we could probably find some kind of get ahead of the adoption curve and find the personas and the people that were more likely to pursue AI knowledge and tools, and therefore, as an institute, be interested in the content we create in our events and our online courses. So I have this database. And I was like, well, that's a good starting point. And so what I had learned from kind of following Ethan's guidance and some others is sometimes you just start with like a really basic thing. So I took this data set, downloaded it from Google Sheets, and it's pretty straightforward data, but again, it's just a bunch of Sales Navigator data. And I just said, review the data set and identify the best titles and industries to target for AI education and events. So again, just real simple, not giving it much. It first went through and did an analysis of the data set. So it says like the data set seems to be a list of different job titles with corresponding functions and metrics related to adoption and impact of AI and automation. It includes counts of roles globally, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes through like column by column and gives you its interpretation of what the data is. And it was all accurate. So it says to determine the best titles and industries to target for education and events, we can consider roles with high adoption likelihood. And it kind of goes on. It's like, okay, this is pretty interesting. And then it says, let's continue with the analysis. And then goes through and actually starts analyzing the data. And then it comes back with, based on the combined rating of adoption, likelihood, and automation impact, which were two variables I created, like subjective assessments of these things. Here's the top 10 titles to target for AI education and events. It then like force ranks the top 10. It then goes through and ranks the top 7 industries based on size. So then I said, can you create visualizations to help tell the story of the data and market opportunities? It then created 2 bar charts that showed the data by title and by industry. And then it analyzed those and explained what was showing. I then said adoption likelihood and intelligent automation impact are subjective ratings that I created and estimated. What else should I be thinking about for target audiences? It then went through and gave me 8 different things I should think about enriching this data set with. Now, Code Interpreter is not connected to the internet, so it couldn't go do this for me, but it said you could look at current AI usage, growth of a role or industry, technological readiness, regulatory environment, like all these really interesting things that it's like, those would be interesting data sets. And then I said, what data sources do you have access to that you could use to enrich it? And that's when it's like, well, hey, I don't have access to the internet, but here's ways I could go get this data. And then I said, what questions should we be asking about this data set that could lead to interesting strategic insights? This is, to me, where it starts getting really interesting. This is the data analyst side where I may be a business leader, I may be a marketer, and I look at a data set, it's like, I don't even know what to ask this thing. Like, I don't live in data sets all day long. I don't know how to build charts outside of a bubble chart and a bar graph and, heat maps. It's like, I don't know all the different visualizations that can exist. So I just said, like, what should I be asking of it? And it came back with 6 really good questions, like things, some of them I hadn't thought to ask of the data. And then I said, what are some creative ways we could visualize this data? And it came back with a heat map, bubble chart, tree map, box and whisker plots. I don't even know if that's a real thing. Like stacked bar chart, network graph. And then I said, can you please build these for me? Build me a heat map. So all of these things it did. So everything I'm explaining right now, it just did in real time. And so take any data set, anything about churn, about growth, about audience, about persona building, about target markets, whatever it is, that's what this now does. You can upload any style document to it and it'll just analyze it. So as a marketer, the potential uses of this are massive. And it really does, like, again, it's not a replacement to data scientists and data analysts. It does have the ability to code and do all these interesting things, but I think in the near term, it's just going to be additive. It's going to give marketers and business leaders access to technology and capabilities that they probably just didn't have on their team, or they didn't have the time or resources to see through. So I don't know. I mean, this is, if you imagine this, Mike, like we're big HubSpot users. Can you imagine if this capability just lived in HubSpot and we could just ask questions of our data and build charts on the fly rather than having to learn, how to go in and build custom reports and all that stuff? Like, I don't want to do that. I just want to ask it to do it for me.
That's really interesting you mentioned that because, you and I come from the agency world, and I was thinking about how I would have killed to have this tool
Oh my
on the
gosh, yeah.
agency side, right? Not only for our own business, but for our clients. I mean, this constituted a good amount of the questions we had hoped to be asking about clients' businesses when we could actually get at the data.
Yeah, the one I was thinking about as I was doing this is, so if anyone's taken our state of the industry survey that I think we're closing that down this
Yeah,
week, I believe.
yep.
So we're going to be going through and do the data analysis. Well, Mike and I have been doing that for years on our own. Like we export the data from the survey. I think we have over 800 or 900 responses this
Yep.
year. It's like to 19 or 20 different questions. And then you have all the profile data. Well, that's me and Mike building pivot tables and going through and doing analysis and then building charts based on, I mean, we're talking about dozens of hours to analyze
Mhm.
this survey data. That's a perfect use case for it. Just dump it in and say, what correlations do you see in this data? Like, what is interesting about that? And then just kind of like ask it questions. But we can do that because we have worked that data for years.
Right.
We already know the insights we look for. You could even feed it the PDF of last year's report and
Mhm.
say, here's last year's report, draft findings based on this format for this year. Start there and then say, like, what else are we missing? So my mind just immediately, when you start playing with this, is like, oh my gosh, like all the use cases, all the times we're working with data where we don't really love it. Like, I mean, I love finding the insights in the data. I hate having to go in and remember how to build the pivot tables properly. And like,
Right.
I don't do it more than like a few times a year. So it's just not my expertise, but I'm not going to pay a data analyst to do it. Like we can do it. We just don't necessarily enjoy that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Spoiler, we will absolutely be using it for the state of the industry report. Even, I think in some of the examples too, I don't think people realize even the low hanging fruit with stuff like this. In the state of the industry example, even my ability to upload the spreadsheet and say, build tables out of these different columns, that took hours before, and we had to do it just to see numbers,
Right.
baseline numbers to even extract insights from.
Yeah. Or it may be like, we've historically used pie charts and bar graphs because
Yeah.
that's what we know to do. You could say, what are some other creative ways we could be visualizing this in this report?
Yeah.
We know, now we may still need to go build them, from a high res perspective or what. I don't know how the charts, how well they export. But yeah, the other thing I'll share real quick. I had this like perfect use case in my head that I can't do now. So for Ethan's fireside chat at Maycon, I have like 15 of his articles from his newsletter that like I want to base the interview on, just like things I want to explore with him. And so what I thought about doing was creating an Excel file that had those links in it and then just uploading that to Code Interpreter and saying, go step by step through each of these links and find 5 to 7 interesting questions to ask about each of the articles. Now, I was going to still go through myself, and I've read every article multiple times, like, so I could assess it. But because it's not connected to the internet, I can't do that. So I'm
Right.
probably actually going to have to do a one-off where I'll use GPT-4 with the browser connection, and I'll just go one by one and do it just to see what happens. And I may actually use it as an experiment with Bard and maybe Anthropic or something. Like I may play around with our inflection and
Yeah.
see how it does with that use case.
Yeah, that's awesome.